Hello. Hey, happy Father's Day, everybody. We're really excited about that. Hope you enjoyed your video of your kids. And the Kimber woo was pretty cute. Kimber, I like it. Way to go. Well, here, this is my friends, Alice and Brad von Seggern. And last week you heard from Christy. We're talking over the next couple weeks just about the concept of our series is that we're together. And being together is very broad because there's lots of different aspects of life. And we thought it'd be really cool to talk a little bit about family and parenting today because so much of what, if you have kids, most everything in your life revolves around that right now. Especially if your kids are young. You're like, everything in your world's like, what are we doing for supper? What are the kids going to eat? What aren't they going to eat? Where are they at right now? We have no idea. Go to the neighbors, we'll find them, And so we thought, Brad and Alice, I appreciate you being here. Thanks for joining us. I know that you're just loving this excitement of being on stage. If you don't know Brad, Brad's more of the behind the scenes, sage, and then Alice is more of the, what would I say, sharer. So why don't you guys tell us a little bit about your guys' selves and your family and what God has done in your life. Go for it.
Okay, well, we've been married close to 30 years. We have two
That's
boys,
awesome.
and they're grown now. They're both married. They both have awesome wives that we just love. We have Brian is 28, and Trevor is almost 25. Mm-hmm.
We can tell who the favorite
Think
is.
about
It's
that.
fine. Yeah. Well.
So, and we married kind of late, close to 30, and didn't ever expect that we would get to have kids. So we feel like our marriage and our children are really just a huge blessing to us that we weren't sure that we were going to get. And so the family is like just awesome to us. Do you want to add anything?
I think you covered it.
Of your houses and on your gates. So it's this idea of the way I want you to live, the way I want you to follow me. Jesus would say, follow me, right? Is to remind yourself of it, to impress it on your children, to post it on the door. And so this is the context I want to have this conversation today. So one of the first things it says is make these commands be on your hearts. Whoa. So how are we okay back there? Party time. Okay. So I think that's a pretty profound statement. How impactful is your personal relationship with Jesus on your kids and on your family?
So I really think that your kids are always going to do more of what you do than what you say.
Yeah.
We always felt like preaching at our kids and pounding it into them wasn't the answer. But our relationship with them and them seeing us and respecting us because of our love and commitment to them and our love and commitment to Christ would really have a lot more impact.
Yeah.
And so I would say Brad and I met in church at a singles group. Church has always been a really big part of our life. And, of course, with that, our faith in Christ. And I think that our kids saw that it just was our foundation. It wasn't that we had, okay, it's 8 o'clock and we have Bible time and we're going to
Right.
every day. We can't
Family
claim
devotion
to have
time,
done
yeah,
that.
yeah.
However, they saw me reading the Bible, and we prayed with them at night. And when we had problems, we prayed together. And we went to church always as a family. And so I think that had the biggest impact was just that our foundation was Jesus.
Yeah, I think what Alice says is true. And looking back, I think we tried to have our children be our best friends. And we did that by trying to spend a lot of time with them because we know love is spelled T-I-M-E.
Yeah.
So as you spend time with them and you act interested in what they say and you pray with them and just try to pay attention to them, they become your best friends. And when they're your best friends, they want to please you. And then everything else is a lot easier if they want to be around you
Right,
and they
that
respect
wins,
you.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's almost like your faith played out in your life, like creates a depth of relationship that it just sets you up for a better story, even in the hard times, right?
Yeah. I think living by example is a much better teacher than trying to preach at your children how to live. And
Right.
so we've tried to have that be the center of how we raise children.
Yeah, that's good. So
living by example.
Yeah, so maybe talk a little bit about that. It says impress them on your children, and I think you're right. Try to preach to your children is not. It's like they see, like you said, if you're preaching but not living it, they'll see right through that. Mm-hmm. And so this impress it on your children. How did maybe you practically teach your kids about Jesus, or how did you practically? I know you said prayer, but is there anything specific that you guys did that was because I think we're all looking for tools in some way. We're living it out in our lives, but what are some practical ways to do that? I like the idea of seeing them as your friends and building that relationship. But what are some things you could do practically to teach them?
So I don't know that I have specific. These are the rules that we
Right,
followed.
right.
However, I think that the Bible gives us really a great foundation for life. It works. That's the cool thing, is that Bible principles work and they make your life better. So I can think of some examples. Like one time when our kids were pretty little, we were shopping at Target and got some clothes and got to the car and realized that we hadn't paid for some of what we got. And we sat in the car and I said to our boys, we could drive home and not have paid for this. And we would have saved $16.
For kids, that's a lot of money.
And
yeah.
I said, I think what God would want us to do is to be honest and to live with integrity. And I think that we would feel better if we went back in and told them.
Right.
And so we did. We walked back in and we went to the service desk and we said, when we got to the car, we realized we haven't paid for some of this stuff. And the clerk was just shocked and said, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you came back in," and said that. And she said, "You know what? We have backpacks that we're giving away, and we'd like to give your kids some backpacks." And at that time, Bugs Life was really cool.
Right, yeah.
And so they got Bugs Life backpacks. And then we got to go back to the car and talk about, doing the right thing and living the way God wants you to live. He can bless you.
Right.
And we got blessed because of that. And my kids would say that we said over and over and over, especially me, if you live a life that God can bless, He will bless it. Right. And still, Brian and Trevor would say to me, that thing you always say, Mom, if you live a life that God can bless, He will bless it. So I don't know, that's not really a practical rule, but
no, but I think it builds on the fact that you're living this out in your life, and that lesson is way more profound to someone, memorable, than, hey, don't steal, don't do this, right? It's it's really practical, and it's practically walking out in your life. You're seeing Christ's love work out in your life, and that's hugely important.
I would say our kids probably think we had a lot of rules. I don't think we had so much rules as we had reasons. So, why don't you steal? Because people can't trust you, and they're not going to like you if you're somebody that steals. Or why don't you lie? Because how do your friends feel about you? So we had more reasons than we had rules.
Good. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. Let's say something about that.
Yeah, just one more little thing to add. So when my boys were in high school, I was involved with them in a lot of different activities, and having them always around me. Some of these activities, we were with them multiple times a week, 2 or 3 hours at a time, so I was spending a lot of time with youth. And having one of my sons who was with me at the time, always with me, and just seeing how a father should conduct himself outside of the home, I think sets a good example. And then they look back at that to say, okay, this is the way a dad is supposed to be. Yeah. So if you try to do the right thing, they'll end up doing the right thing later on.
Yeah, it's funny because I see in myself, I have a great dad. I see in myself, I'm becoming like my dad, and it's really funny. Even some of my, I was walking up the stairs the other day, and I was like, oh, I'm walking up the stairs like my dad does, But it was but my dad did the same thing. I think he modeled for us how to live, and so then when kind of the rubber met the road, where this is how I'm going to be, I just became that, which is great. It's like, oh, well, this is a great man who loves Jesus and loves his family and has done good in the world. And I'm like becoming that because that's what was modeled for me.
Mm-hmm. I've found several times when my boys recant different experiences, they'll say, Dad, remember when you said this and when you said that and when you did this? And
You don't remember.
I'm shocked that they remember those little
Yeah.
things I told them.
Yeah.
And, it has an impact. You just don't always realize it at the time.
Yeah, I think,
your life.
yeah, it's like, I would say like being like a elementary school teacher or like a junior high youth pastor or even a dad is like a thankless job until sometime down the road at times, right? You're like, oh, this actually worked or this actually paid off, So talk a little bit, I think that reasons more than rules is a really profound thing that, I know we don't have a question for that, but talk about that because I think we grew up in a generation who was like, well, don't do this. Why? Because I said so. And how, talk about how that creates more freedom and maybe what that did in helping your kids to think. Because I think that's a really important aspect, I think, of home life.
So I think as we were raising our children, sometimes I question how honest I was with them and how much you should tell them and how much you shouldn't tell them. And I probably erred on the side of saying more than less, explaining why you can't go to this house, that it's a house where we don't feel like you're safe, and here are the reasons why. Or
it's like, I think most dads feel, and I'll speak for myself, I feel mostly inadequate to be a dad sometimes, right? Because I know I'm well aware of my own shortcomings and my own short temper and my own, in my own times where I just want to not be around anyone or whatever it is, my selfishness. But, and you kind of said that too, it's like, I think I'm doing right, I don't know. How would you encourage dads to know that even the little things matter a ton and really have an impact in the long term? Because I mean, you see, I know Brian better, right? So I can see the way Brian, interacts with you guys, his deep respect and love for you, while he's done things, he moved away from us, Brian. We love you. Come back. But talk about maybe how would you encourage a dad or someone in our life stage, most of us with young kids or even soon-to-be kids, how would you encourage them?
Well, going back to what Alice said about my father, when we had these conversations with him, what would you do differently? And there were 5 children in my family, and he said, every one of you is very different. And I think because each child is different, you have to find what they like and then kind of align yourself with their likes and encourage growth and whatever their interests are. And if you do that, then you establish a connection. And once you have that connection, then you have love and understanding, and you can go on to the next bit of training or whatever you want to do to encourage your children to be a good person.
That's good, yeah. And also, so it goes on to say, it says talk about them when you're at home, when you're on a walk, when you lie down, when you get up, which says to me it's like wherever you go, this idea of faith and who Jesus is a part of life. So I know you've talked about that a little bit. How do you I think at times parents can feel inadequate about talking about their faith because maybe they don't have all the answers, right? Or I don't know, my youngest asks the hardest faith questions ever. And I'm like, Clara, I don't know. It's not time for bed. I love you. But you try to answer them. But I think there's sometimes this inadequacy of I don't know if I believe, or maybe I have my own doubts. So how do you create that kind of dialogue in your home? These are not easy questions.
Yeah, that's a hard question. So. I think admitting that I don't know the answer to that, I don't know, is okay. Because I think all of our life we go through not having all the answers, not knowing, not being sure whether it's okay to let them do something or not let them do it, where all the lines are. So admitting, I don't know, but we can pray about it. Dad and I will pray about it. And then talking it through together. As a parent, you never know. I'll tell this crazy story. I think when Brian was our first, when he was really young, you know, you feel like when they're really little, you have quite a lot of control over them, right? And you feel like, you know, I can be this great parent because I had great parents, and so I'm going to be really good at this. And then there comes a point that you realize I don't have any control, and this little being can do whatever they want. And Brian, when he was maybe 2.5 or 3, bit, and it was a habit that we had no control over. He only did it when he was really mad and really out of control, so it wasn't like reasoning was a very good tool. And so I put him in timeout in his room, and I went downstairs and I heard this horrible scream, and I ran back upstairs, and he was literally urinating all over his room. And I said, Brian, what are you doing? And he said, I'm peeing all over my room because I'm mad at you. And I was flabbergasted that my child would do that. And so I scolded him, of course, and he pointed his little finger at me, this little chubby 3-year-old finger, and he said, the next time I'm mad at you, I'm peeing all the way down the steps. And I remember going downstairs and sitting on the couch and praying and thinking, God, I have 0 control. I have no control, and if this is how it is when he's 3, when he's a teenager, I'm sunk. I have no hope. And I think that was a point that I had to say, this child is yours. I can only do my best, and I'm committed to do my best, but I need to put him in your hands, and I need you to be the foundation, and trust that you love him and you'll take care of things, and I'll do what I can, but the rest is up to you. Right. And that seemed to work out really good. It did never happen
really
again.
Good.
And you know, thankfully our kids both have grown up, just they're awesome people. Awesome people. We're so proud of them, and I think they make us look good because they're so good.
Yeah, it does help, doesn't it? Yeah, I remember when our Ella was born, you know, our middle child, she has Down syndrome, and so everything that you think it's gonna be, you just don't know. And then God really, for me, spoke and was like, you know, your time with your kids is about stewardship and not about like achievement. And that was really big for me because I was like, oh, okay, so my job is how do I serve and love and show them and steward the time I have with them, however that may be, and hopefully they want it later in life, you know, and they want to spend time with me. But I think that's big, the honesty and the just like, hey, I might not know, but we'll figure it out together. Because that's how it is with the Lord. My relationship with Jesus is like, I don't know what to do, Lord. What do we do? And then there's the Holy Spirit. He speaks to us. And so it also probably teaches them how to navigate that uncertainty of life too. So I think that's really big. Anything you want to say about that, Brad? That was good. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. I think I remember one time I met a missionary, and all of his kids were like going to be missionaries, going to be church planners, going to be. And I asked him, like, how did you do it? Like, how did that happen? Not that I want all my kids to be missionaries and leave the country. I don't want that to happen, Lord. But he said, I never lied to him, and I never kept them from suffering, and we were honest about our struggles. And I thought that was so important, just like the everyday life. Like, I have no control over what is going to happen in life, but we can, with the Lord, really work this out together, you know? So it says in Proverbs 22:6, says, direct your children in the right path, and when they are older, they will not leave it. And one of the versions says, direct them in the way they should go, right? And I think one of the takeaways from that verse is not that this is where you should go that way. But God, like Brad said, you know, every kid's different, has a different path, a different journey. So what did you do when you maybe saw your kids start to stray or go down a path that maybe you didn't think was right? Because again, it's like you don't have control, or like, and you've instilled these things. Like, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with maybe they're making decisions that I wouldn't make? How do you process that?
I think that's really hard because I think, you know, as a parent, there's nothing you love more than your child. Mm-hmm. And we tend to want to live our hopes and dreams through our children, and we want them to be perfect. Right. And it really hurts our heart.
Like we are perfect.
Immensely.
Oh, yes, obviously.
When they aren't doing something that's right, and partly because, you know, when they're not doing something that's right, it ends up hurting them.
Right.
So I think that's super hard. But I think that the most important thing you can do is love them no matter.
Mm-hmm.
And know that, we always said to our kids, no matter what, no matter if you failed at college, if you got, if you couldn't pass one class, we are still here for you.
Right.
There's nothing so bad that your parents aren't going to love you. There's nothing that you can do that would make us not want you. And we're always, always here for you. It gives them a foundation that it's okay and it's safe. Safe to come to us with your problems, and we'll help you work it out. I think sometimes we go back to Bible promises, because when you can't see it, you have to have some faith that God does promise. And in the verse you just read, it says, when they're old, they won't depart from it. It doesn't say, when they're 16, they're going to be perfect.
Why does it say that, Lord? Come on.
That's what we would like.
We would like that, yeah.
And I remember a lot of times that I reminded myself, the Bible says when they're old, they're not going to depart from us, that you're laying a foundation, and it doesn't mean that every brick is going to be perfect and everything's going to be the way you like it, but you lay that foundation so that they have that to come home to. They have that as their security and their good place to come back to.
Yeah, that's good. Anything with that? I think about it like planting seed. Like you've planted seed and it's in there, and someday it's going to grow. We're not sure when.
We homeschooled our children for until they were in high school, and so we had a lot of time with them. But that's one of the most frustrating things I think you could ever do.
We experienced that this year. Yes.
A lot of parents are experiencing that right now.
Right.
But we had a year of. I heard every single day, it's all because of you. It's all your fault. This is all because of you. Parenting isn't always happy.
Yeah.
There's always joy underneath of it, and there's always love underneath of it, but for sure not every day is good, and your kids don't every day bless you and thank you for being the perfect mother. That would be nice. But I always held on to that promise. When they're old, they won't depart from it.
They will not depart from it in the name of Jesus.
It might be 80.
Yeah, right. This morning, my youngest and I were having a little bit of like this going on. And then finally I was like, listen, Clara, it is Father's Day. And then she 180 turned like, oh, Daddy, I love you. I'm like, when they're older, they will not depart from it, right? So last question. What do you think is maybe the most impactful thing that you guys did as parents that maybe you haven't shared yet? Or what would you advise us not to do as parents? You can pick from one of those two questions.
So there's a Bible verse, you may know the words of it better, but I know the idea behind it is, don't exasperate your children. It's so easy to lecture or scold or punish or whatever. But I think when you or I look back at our childhood, you remember how you felt at that moment. Your most impactful memories have to do with how you felt. Right? That I felt like my mom was so proud of me.
Sure,
or I felt like my dad was so angry. Or I felt so humiliated at that point. And our children are little people with really big feelings. And when they grow up, that's what they're going to have to share is the way they felt about things. So I think it's huge to raise them thinking about their feelings and how they're going to remember and go back to that. That if they felt like your punishment or your rules were because you love them, that's great.
Right.
If they felt like you humiliated me, you hurt me, those are memories you don't want your kids to have. And so I think keeping in mind that these are little people that God gave you, and we're responsible for doing that to the best of our ability and protecting them, which includes protecting their feelings.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Okay.
So I'll just say this. One thing that we should stay away from, fathers, is physical abuse. Because like in my generation and my father's generation, it was common.
Yeah.
And, not really bad, but always some sort of physical abuse for discipline. And it was, all my friends got it, all my cousins got it, and I think when we raised our children, Alice and I talked about it, it was time to break that cycle.
Yeah, that's
And
good.
we just, we've never regretted that.
Yeah, that's really good. I think that's a good place to even, the idea of like what cycles do you need to break? I think about, generational sins or generational things. Like we all get an opportunity with our children to decide this is who we're going to be. God, this is what you want us to be. And so, like, how did you go about, maybe that's a little practical. Okay, we're never going to, obviously, be physical, but, like, how did you practically do that? Because I think changing kind of the trajectory of your life, for your kids and your children's children is a huge, huge blessing that we can do to our kids. So have you thought about that more? I know it's a pretty heavy-duty question.
It is, but I'll tell you, so we had a lot of talks about this early on when we had children, how to handle this issue, and always felt like, how do you tell your children not to hit your brother, but then you would hit them, right?
Right.
That just never rang true with us, so we just went away from that. And I would go back to my earlier comments. If they're your best friend, that they want to please you, you don't have to physically abuse them.
Sure. Yeah.
We've used timeout. That worked for us.
Right. Except for that one time, but that's just, yeah.
Yeah. My boys will say now, Dad, when you gave me the eye, that was the worst thing.
Yeah, right.
So,
right.
Sometimes a long stare is all you need.
Yeah, the full name, right? The middle name and everything together, yeah.
I think that if your kids feel love and secure from you, that if they don't, when they do something wrong, they feel like they've broken that or they're separated from that. And that's why timeout works, because they're not in that comfortable, happy space of feeling secure. And so I think because we had that relationship with our kids, discipline became really easy, because if you put them in timeout, they're like, well, I want to be with you. I want to come back downstairs.
I want a hug.
Yeah. So I think that really strong bond makes it way easier to discipline.
Yeah, because it's out of respect and love, and that's good.
And I would say with our kids, they would say, we would say, look at my eyes when you talk to them seriously, especially Brad did that. They hated to look at his eyes.
I love that.
That was like the worst punishment.
Can I steal that? I'm going to steal that.
But
right
I
in my
think
eyes.
because they had so much respect for their dad, having their dad be ashamed of something they did was enough punishment in itself.
Yeah, right.
That you seldom had to go further than that. To have your parent be disappointed with you when they loved you so much was hard enough.
Yeah.
That you didn't have to.
I'm not mad, I'm
very
disappointed. Oh, gosh,
Yeah.
rip your heart out now. Well, Rach, you want to come up and we're going to pray. Thank you so much for sharing. It was really valuable to me, and I know for all you watching and you guys in the room, the few of you. It was really, I think to know that, at the long haul of the journey and like the things that we talk about a lot, like how do you love each other, respect each other, be honest about your mistakes, like value the things of Christ, really do pay off in the long run. Would you guys pray, both or one of you, and then I'll close and just pray for parents and pray. Brad, actually, would you pray for dads too? Put you on the spot, but I appreciate you doing that. If you pray for the dads today, and then Alice, and I'll close.
Lord, we thank you for this time together. We thank you for the opportunity to share with other parents. And Lord, we pray for all the fathers in our church. Help them to be good role models, examples. And we ask that you encourage all the fathers to love and care for their children.
Father God, I just want to say